Hello, you're listening to Shoot the Hostage. My name's Sarah, and together with my partner Dan, we are a movie podcast where we talk about 8 different films per season based around a specific theme. Now, if you're hearing my voice, that means it's my choice of theme this season. But before we get stuck in, I do want to mention we get quite spoilery, so please bear that in mind. We don't want to ruin the film for you, so if you haven't seen it, maybe go away and then come back. If you like what you hear and you would like to help us out, there are a number of ways you can do that. The absolute easiest one is to just recommend us to a friend. If you want to go the extra mile, a 5-star review on Spotify would be hugely appreciated. A review on your podcast player of choice would also be hugely helpful. And if you really, really want to help us, we've got a Patreon, which is £3 a month, and you get access to a ton of extra content in the form of reviews of new cinema releases, new streaming releases. You get to see the lineup of the season ahead of time, and we do a wrap show at the end of every season. But all of that aside, I just want to say thank you for listening, and let's get stuck in. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Sarah.
Did you know that war is bad? It's not a good thing.
Yeah, I did know that, actually.
Did you? So you didn't actually learn anything whilst watching this week's movie?
I did learn something while watching this movie.
Oh.
Very specific things, actually. But yes, I knew beforehand that war was bad. I knew that genocide was bad. I knew that many, many things that happen to people are bad.
Oh, good. We're on the same page then.
Is that it?
Isn't that convenient? That's the end of the discussion,
Cool.
Yes. No, I feel like I should preface this by apologising because I've done it again, haven't I?
Who are you apologising to? The listener or me?
Mostly to you because...
I reject your apology.
Oh, wow. That's so harsh.
No, go on. Let me hear you out first.
Yeah, you haven't even heard it.
Okay. Please continue.
I apologise for putting you through yet another harrowing movie as part of my choice. I'm mostly genuine in that apology.
Okay.
Mostly. But I will do it again.
What, like 70-30?
Yeah, because it's sort of an empty apology because I'm going to make you watch gnarly movies again.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I mean it for now.
Okay. Apology accepted.
Oh, good.
I have noticed that your seasons are way darker than my seasons. But it seems like the further we get with the podcast, and it's interesting because mine definitely are science fiction or action or whatever.
Or definitely not neo-Western.
Yeah. And yours seem to be a lot darker in tone. They certainly have darker subject matter, even if they are something that was really dark, Bad Boy Bubby, but ultimately was weirdly uplifting. This is not that at all. This is completely opposite to that. It's certainly the darkest film I think that you've chosen.
I would agree with that.
It's probably one of the darkest and most difficult movies to watch that's ever been made. Question? For different reasons?
Yes. Yeah, not in terms of how graphic or gory it is, but certainly within the context of the fact that these things happened in real life.
Yeah, it's the reality of it.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning, shall we? This week we're covering Come and See, directed by Elem Klimov.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was his last movie.
It was his last movie. That's what I heard too.
I'm not 100% sure why. I don't know if he sort of got to this stage in his career, made the best anti-war movie that's ever been made and just went, yeah, that's it, I'm done.
Basically, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Basically, he was, I made this movie, I've said everything that I want to say. What's the point in making any more?
Wow, I've fulfilled my purpose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This is 1985. This came out.
Yes.
It's our 4th movie from 1985.
Oh, I always forget about this bit. 1985.
Let's get this out. Let's get this little jovial bit out of the way because let's face it, this is not going to be a laugh a minute episode. We're going to be talking about the film.
That sounds like a challenge. No, it's not.
I can hear them switching off from here. No, but this is the 4th movie from 85 that we've discussed. Can you name the other 3?
Near Dark?
No, that's 87.
Fuck. No, the music's not helping. 85. No, I can't.
Give me
Oh,
a
one
beat.
of them's a Police Academy. Police
Yeah.
Academy 2.
Yeah.
It's always a Police
course.
Academy.
It's always Police Academy. That's one of three.
Okay. No, I need some help.
I'm Emilio Estevez and I'm crying because people just won't take me seriously and I'm going to wear a vest top.
Wait, what?
I'm going to do a little dance on a counter with other 3 teenagers.
Oh, The Breakfast Club.
The Breakfast
I
Club.
completely forgot we covered The Breakfast Club. I was like, we haven't done any Emilio Estevez movies.
Oh, yes, we have.
But yeah, we have.
And
Not
we'll
only
get-
that, it was my choice.
It was your choices in your season. We'll do more other Emilio Estevez movies.
Oh, I'm sure.
Young Guns 2, Free Jack. There's one more.
Okay.
It's got Patrick Stewart in it.
Oh, Life Force.
Life Force, yes.
Well, that was kind of forgettable for me, though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
I'm not Toby Hooper's biggest fan, am I? You know that.
Oh, well, that's it. This is our 4th movie from 85.
Quite different to the others.
Yes, very different. Definitely covering a lot of areas there, different genres, different visions, different, you would argue, artistic merit, perhaps.
I think the only thing that this movie and any of the police academies have in common is that they have a loose connection with Russia.
Because Mission to Moscow.
Yeah. That's about it.
I thought he was going to say uniforms.
Oh, that and the
Fascists.
scene in Come and See where 2 men spit an egg back and forth.
Oh yeah, of course, that unforgettable scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of that here. None of that. This is not a Police Academy movie.
Mm-mm.
I was not aware of this film until probably about a year ago when you mentioned it.
Same.
Something like that.
Same.
Oh, you hadn't heard of it either?
No. I think I first became aware of this film maybe 2 years ago. And I was really curious because it was probably on some sort of listicle of like movies you'll never want to watch again.
Yeah.
Which I seem to view as a challenge.
Yeah, because it's the second time you watched it.
But I don't know, it piqued my interest. And then I had a look online, did a bit of digging, and it's so highly regarded and so well reviewed everywhere. And I think at the moment it's the 2nd best rated movie ever on Letterboxd. I think it was number 1 for a while. I think it's number 2 now.
Right. Yes, because then Avengers Endgame came out.
Oh, get in the bin.
What's number 1 then?
I
Godfather,
can't remember.
isn't it?
It's a Japanese movie.
Oh, okay, right.
But I added that to my watch list.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get
Of course.
to that.
But yeah, so this had completely flown under the radar for me.
That's
curiously.
That's interesting and rare.
Yeah, really rare.
I was not aware of it until you mentioned it,
Mm.
and you were like, "Oh, that sounds kind of interesting."
But it was hard to get hold of.
Yeah, yeah. So I found it for you on eBay.
So really, this whole thing is your fault, is what you're saying.
I knew you was going to say that. Yes, I do take full responsibility. Had I not, and I think back to that decision I made when I pressed the purchase button, the procurement button on eBay, and I if there was some way you could talk to your past self and go, "Don't do that," I might do that.
Wow, really?
No, not
if you could
really.
unwatch this movie, would you?
No, I certainly wouldn't.
Would you not?
No, I would.
Because we haven't talked about this at all, so I really don't know your feelings on it. I think my assumption would be that you hated it.
It's. Ooh, are we going to go straight in with opinions, are we?
You don't have to.
I've got a complicated relationship with this movie. Having just watched it 3 days ago, I did not enjoy it, watching it.
I think that's fair. I don't think it's an enjoyable film. I don't think it's intended to be enjoyed or consumed in that way, really.
100% agree. I don't necessarily think you're supposed to enjoy it.
No.
Maybe if you sat down and made some popcorn, like, right, let's watch Come and See, maybe I wouldn't talk to you anymore.
That might be the psychopath test.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I didn't have a great time watching it. I was very confused for a lot of it.
Okay.
I didn't know necessarily what was going on from scene to scene. A lot of the artistic stuff completely went over my head while I was watching it, because I think I was just trying to figure out what was going on for a lot of it. So it's definitely one that would have probably benefited from a second watch. However, I didn't have it in me to watch it again. I will usually, with films that we cover, I'll watch it once.
Yeah.
possibly a second, possibly a third times on rare occasions.
Mhm.
Certainly if there's a director's commentary, but I couldn't do it.
Twice in 3 days would necessitate some sort of therapy, I think.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I didn't have the greatest time watching it, but I have thought about it a lot more, and I've done not a huge amount of research, but some research which has made me think about it slightly differently.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that I've watched it, and it's definitely like a huge gaping gap in my cinema knowledge that I'm glad has now been filled.
Mhm.
This is what I say all the time, is one of these things that I might not necessarily enjoy watching all of the films that we cover, but there's always a benefit in that it's given me a new movie to reference, to refer to.
Yeah.
I would say I've got a few comparisons to this movie, and certainly I think
Ooh.
other makers of those movies that I'll mention later have seen this movie for sure.
Okay.
So I'm glad that it's been watched by my eyeballs. Never shall it cross my eyeballs ever again.
That was going to be my next question. Would you ever consider watching it a second time?
Absolutely not.
Never.
Nope.
Wow. Okay. I think that's well, I say wow. I don't know.
You're like,
that
let's
seems...
put it on tomorrow.
Yeah. I shouldn't be shocked really, because that seems to be the prevailing opinion, that it's kind of a one and done for most people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not most people.
You're not. You've seen it twice in a year, so congratulations. Do you know much about the inception of this?
I don't really
kinda
know.
happened? So director Elem Klimov.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote this in the 70s.
Okay.
And he had read a book by Ales Adamovich, and he brought him on as a writer for this. So they kind of wrote Come and See together.
Okay, yeah, I knew there was a co-writer.
Yeah, and that was in the 70s. So what happened is it spent about 8 years in like this really bureaucratic, tied up in this process with the State Committee for Cinematography. So it was effectively on a shelf for 8 years.
So it was filmed?
No, they just.
Or they were still at the script stage?
It was still at the script stage because
Okay.
it needed to be approved. I think Klimov wanted to make this because it was approaching the 40th anniversary of these atrocities,
Mm-hmm.
and he was worried that people were going to forget.
That history might repeat itself.
Precisely.
It's a valid fear.
And in the 70s, you've got the Cold War, and he was just really worried that we're going to repeat the same mistakes. So he really wanted to make this. It eventually got approved. He didn't make any cuts to the script. The one thing that they wanted was for him to change the title. Now, the title that he was working with,
yeah, I know this,
was Kill Hitler.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we just don't want the name Hitler in a title. So he and Adamovich decided to change the name to Come and See after consulting the Bible.
Ah, yes,
all
the Book
books.
of Revelation.
The Book of Revelations. And that's the one with the 4 horse people, isn't it? And is that the end of the world?
The 4 horse girls.
Yeah, whatever.
Yes, yeah,
But
4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
But the title of this came from that.
I've got the full quote if you want it.
God, please.
So straight from the Book of Revelation is, "And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him."
See, you're reading that, and all I'm hearing is Johnny Cash.
I know, I was just going to say you might also recognise that. Was it The Man Comes Around?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's funny
I
because
thought so.
I Googled Come and See, and then I think that popped up
Yeah.
somehow, or some combination of words anyway, and that popped up. I was like, oh shit. Because that song obviously is just ingrained in us, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's the only song that exists, I think. It's on every single movie. Apart from this one, ironically. That'd been weird, wouldn't it?
It does have an absolute Mozart banger on the soundtrack, though.
Which is...
I can't remember the piece.
Okay.
I'm terrible at it because it's always like Symphony number 76 played on the bassoon or so. Like they've always got weird names and I can never remember them, but I recognise the pieces of music when I hear them and I know it's Mozart.
I thought it was Boom Boom Boom, Let Me Hear Say Wayo.
It was actually Sandstorm Darude.
Of course it was, yeah. That's the other song that exists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually got made. 84, they shot it. As I said, no compromises on the script. Apparently, it was just that title change.
Okay.
And as I said, Klimov he really wanted to make it because he was worried about what was going on in the world at the time. He himself grew up in Stalingrad and had to escape that with his mother. His dad stayed behind to fight and he left with his mum, and he describes some stuff that happened to him in an interview, just being protected by his mum. They've got put blankets over him. He's seeing fire like as far as you can see. They're bombing petrol factories, and it was just absolute carnage, chaos, and just misery all round. So he had experienced it, and so had Adamovich as well. Adamovich actually fought with the partisans, so really like first-hand perspective, and they thought it was very important to make it. So I'd agree with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I keep seeing amongst reviews of this is that it should be mandatory viewing for everybody, but just the once.
That was going to be my closing statement, honestly, but you've mentioned it now. Like, I think that this should be compulsory viewing for everyone.
Yeah.
If we had kids, I'd make them watch this.
None of this like Peppa Pig shit. Straight to come and see.
No, I'm not saying like you squeeze it out the vagine and then you immediately put come and see. In fact, you just put the film Come and See in the where do babies get born? It's not an operating theatre, pregnancy room or whatever. You put it in front of the lady area where the baby comes out of, so it's the first image it sees is Come and See. I'm not saying do that. That would be irresponsible. I'm just saying if I had kids around about 10 maybe, just pop them in a cupboard, put them back in a cupboard, lock it, and then no.
So what was your first memory?
No, you traumatise a kid. But no, I think at some kind of formative age, I think it would be good if you could watch this. Surprised that I didn't know about this, surprised that it was never mentioned at school, but whether it's in history or English or media studies, there's a bunch of kind of areas that you could put that into. And we did watch a lot of films at school as well. We watched Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Really?
When we were reading Bill Shakespeare stuff.
Lucky.
So
I had to watch Schindler's List, which is a bit more in keeping with what we're talking about.
Yeah, we didn't watch that at school.
I feel like I watched that in RE, religious education.
Okay.
Rather than history.
That feels like it should be history. Yeah.
It does, but I went to a church school. It was a little bit odd.
Okay.
I mean, religious education was just branches of Christianity and total disregard of everything else outside of that.
That's interesting. Maybe we should explore that a bit further when we do a religion season.
Oh, I will.
You can
100%
vomit up your childhood memories of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be required viewing. I kind of agree with that. Sort of making a joke about it. Obviously not like a law or whatever, but it should be encouraged. And its intention was so that people don't forget. So there's a certain group of people that I would say should definitely watch this. People that deny things like the Holocaust. Oh, that never happened.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. I think
Ben Shapiro should be strapped down Clockwork Orange style and forced to watch this and Threads on a loop.
Yeah.
For days.
Yeah.
People like that, anyway.
Absolutely.
I would say Donald Trump, but I feel like any sort of messaging would be lost on that buffoon.
Well, yeah.
So certain people cannot be helped.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess while you're talking about that, I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up actually, but I think this film is important now just as much as ever, really, because obviously you've got the stuff that's going on with that man you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
By the time this comes out, I think we'll know who the new president is.
Oh, yeah.
We're peek behind the curtain. We're about a week out from that election.
It's, I think 6 days.
Yeah.
Technically, yeah.
So we will know what's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that man is a fascist.
I am.
But if it walks like a duck... No, there's some really dangerous rhetoric that guy is spreading around and has been for best part of a decade now, which is depressing. And I think there's a real danger of that movement becoming a fascist one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really like fascists.
I mean,
not just with the words, but perhaps the actions.
Yeah. I don't doubt it, because some of the stuff at the more recent rallies really did seem to echo stuff straight from the 40s. Like, it's crazy.
It's nuts. I looked up the definition of fascism earlier because I just wanted to I had that in my mind and I wanted to find out more about the actual definition. And there's a lot of stuff in there that, it's blaming a certain demographic of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's better in the past and we could be great again let's build a super strong army and let's muddy the waters. Let's the propaganda and all of that stuff. And added on to that, he actually did a rally at Madison Square Gardens, which the Nazis did in 1939. Now, his team must have known that. They would have known that. That's what he pays all these fucking morons for. So it must have been a conscious decision to do that. I can't see how else that could be read.
I mean, it's probably some sort of dog whistle, isn't it? The people who know.
Well, yes. Yeah, it was, the spin will be, well, we didn't know, it was, whatever, but then sort of like a little wink, like you say, a little nudge, like, come on, come on.
Mm-hmm.
We hate those people, don't we? And we should be in charge because we're the best, and we're going to tell everyone else how to live their lives. But do you know what? We're going to pretend that we're fighting for freedom of speech. That's what really fucking annoys me about it.
Shall we talk about Come and See before we both get apoplectic with rage? Just as a side note, if you want to hear more about Trump, we have covered The Apprentice on our Patreon.
Oh my God, shameless plug.
We don't often do that.
Let's exploit it. No, I agree.
You can allow the odd one, surely.
Good movie, though.
Very
Spoilers.
good movie, yeah.
Yes, I just, because you mentioned that person, and it's something I've been thinking about, particularly with what's going on, like I said, a week out from the election, that's pretty much all I've been consuming is that stuff. Mm. So it's been on my mind. And I think this film should be beamed before a Trump rally.
Mm-hmm.
It should be law. That's what I say should be law. Anyone that's walking into a Trump rally should watch this for 2 hours, 16 minutes before they go in. It should be a room where they let in 100 people at a time. Yeah, I think I'm done with that little rant. I'm sorry. You're right. We should talk about the movie. Where should we start? Because I said a lot of the artistic stuff was lost on me first time.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it now that I've watched YouTube videos that tell me about it. So I feel like I probably am in a better position to be able to discuss it now than I was a few days ago. But what sticks out to you? What's an area that you think is important to start with? Is it with a scene, or is it with some of the techniques used? Or
I mean, so it doesn't really have like a linear story or narrative in a traditional sense, and it doesn't really have protagonists in a traditional sense either. Like, our protagonist is this either 13, 14-year-old boy who's desperate to become a soldier, which sort of becomes obvious in the first scene on the beach where he and a friend are digging to try and find weapons because they can't join the forces if they don't have a weapon. Like a village elder, I don't know if it's Fleora?
Yeah, Fleora, yeah.
Fleora's
I thought you were going to say
uncle.
Fleetwood Mac, but yeah, Fleora.
Different conversation. Fleora's uncle kind of gives him a bit of a warning, which he doesn't heed. He does find a gun, and then he heads back to the village. And to his mum's dismay, he says, yeah, I'm joining up. I'm going to go and fight. And it's really depressing because he's got like this grin on his face, and he's like winking at his twin little sisters who are being silly and childish. And that's really the only moment where he's allowed to be a child. And everything that happens after that is just a harrowing series of events that rob him of any innocence that he had. I don't know. That struck me on a second watch anyway. Just this childishness that he had about him that he very quickly loses. Yeah,
I suppose you need that in a way. I was saying, I was confused at a lot of points in this movie. Certainly the first scene when he's searching for the guns.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they go when he's at the house.
Sorry, I think the first scene is a little bit confusing because apart from anything, him and his friend are sort of using quite grown-up language. They're kind of mimicking what they will have heard. Like they're sort of parroting what older soldiers would say, which is something that children do because they don't understand the gravity of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say, basically, was the stuff at the house where he's being a child to his sisters. You kind of need that stuff. And he's very naive, obviously, as children are. And you need that stuff to see his journey from being this naive kid to how jaded and, well, just traumatized he is by the end of it. And that's what makes it a coming of age movie, really, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that distinction between what he starts the film as and what he ends the film as.
I'm glad you said that. I was wondering if anyone might question this movie's inclusion in this season.
It might be the
ultimate coming of age movie.
definitive
Yeah.
coming of age movie.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
definitive one.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it definitive. I think that would be depressing if it was the definitive coming of age experience. But yeah, can you remember when you were a kid what your idea of war was?
I think, I don't know really. I can tell you what images or what was going on when I was a kid. It was the Gulf in the 90s. So it was the images of the kind of desert orange, like camouflaged soldiers and stuff like that. So I probably didn't really understand it when I was a kid.
I think I had a very simplistic understanding of it.
Yeah,
I think
simplistic is fair.
just sort of like, I don't know. When you're a child, you do think that there's a right and a wrong. You don't necessarily, or I didn't, stop to think that there was nuance and that both parties obviously believe they're in the right. And that they have more of a right to exist or whatever, they've been indoctrined, manipulated. And so I think as a child, it's just like, yeah, go and shoot the bad men.
Yeah.
And that's like the beginning and end of it.
I will say, like, just as we've been discussing, I had a memory flashback, and I do remember when we were watching the news in the early 90s, my dad saying to me, this is always about money. What do you mean?
Oh,
what
yeah.
do you mean? Wars, it's always about money. Whether that's via resources or labor, you're always exploiting something or somebody for gain. No matter how it's spun, that's why people, obviously people are invaded and you defend yourself, and that's different, but the invasion happens because they want more stuff and they want you to have less. Right?
I don't know, because I feel like maybe this might be the exception. Like the Nazis might be the exception.
The Nazis, in what way?
Well, they wanted to hoard the gold and all that stuff,
Yeah.
obviously, but they also wanted to eradicate an entire people.
They did, but I guess that's but not before exploiting labor.
Yeah,
for
true.
example. The shot that kind of made me think about that was towards the end of the movie, which I'm jumping about, but it was when you cut to the woman in the car eating a lobster,
Mm-hmm.
and then you cut back to the horrific what's happening in the final act, and very clean, loads of resources, the giant war slaughter machine that the Nazis had, that all costs money.
Yeah, true.
And that was their whole ideology, was let's whole ideology. I'm not a historian. I get a bunch of stuff wrong, so forgive me, but I ultimately think it's, yes, we don't want these group of people to exist. We don't think they have the right to exist, but also we want all of your stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's it's always selfish, whether it's painted as whatever, and obviously they got voted in at some point. I don't know what I'm saying, really. What are we talking about?
No, I understand. I think you're right. I think maybe I was trying to oversimplify it, but yeah, money is generally a factor.
I think maybe I am trying to oversimplify it. I think it's control, ultimately, that these parties want, and that means you need money and power. So you're going to exploit people, you're going to get rid of people that might oppose you, you're going to get rid of people you just don't want, I guess. You're trying to shape reality to what you think it should be, which is to your benefit. It's a selfish thing.
I think something else that I really hate, and this is specific to me, I'm not talking about anybody else, but I hate this idea that going to war is somehow noble.
Yeah.
This lie that fighting is noble. It's the opposite of cowardice.
I think that's the difference between a traditional war movie, I would say, and this.
Okay.
In traditional war movies, you definitely get the idea of there's a lot of patriotism, particularly in US war movies, Saving Private Ryan, or name any others, but they tend to romanticize it, and I don't know, it seems to, there's an unrealness to it, maybe.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because there was a famous quote, I believe. I don't know the quote exactly, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was by Francois Truffaut, who said that there's no such thing as a truly anti-war movie because war movies by their definition were like thrilling and I guess to a lesser degree glamorize the events because of that.
Yeah.
And Spielberg vehemently disagreed with that and said that all war movies were essentially anti-war. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle.
I don't think you can say all war movies are anti-war because war propaganda movies exist.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So that's bollocks immediately. Spielberg, you don't know what you're fucking talking about.
You heard it here first.
I thought of one. Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
Let's get Michael Bay to direct a war movie. Fuck you.
Yeah, that was that was some poor judgment.
Absolutely. But that's a clear, that to me that is the polar opposite of Come and See, in the fact that let's get Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett to fly some planes and we're going to make it love triangle.
There's a love story with Kate Beckinsale.
Situation.
Look at all these attractive people.
Yeah, he's the best pilot in the world.
Yeah,
and he shits pieces of gold. But maybe he's dead. But no, he's not dead, and this is weird fucking movie. But yeah, it certainly romanticizes that stuff, I think.
Romanticizes what was an unthinkable atrocity.
And just completely tone deaf, I feel like that movie is. And this is Come and See is truly an anti-war movie.
Yeah.
You would hope that everybody is anti-war, but war still happens, so clearly not.
Yeah. It's a tough one, isn't it? I'm not, as you've said, like neither of us are historians. I'm not well versed enough in the topic to really have too much of a weighty opinion, but I know what I feel. I
know you shouldn't get Michael Bay to direct anything that's not Will Smith punching someone in the face. Not Chris Rock. Not Chris Rock.
Yeah. In a fictionalized context. You have to add that addendum now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you said you had some comparisons? Like what do you think this movie's closest cousins would be? Like, to me, the closest comparison is one I've already mentioned, and that's Threads.
Yeah, Threads absolutely was on that list. Schindler's List was on that list because of the subject matter.
Yeah.
1917 was on that list.
Which I hadn't seen until this week.
We watched it recently because you told me that Roger Deakins had said that Come and See was a big inspiration on him.
I read that somewhere, yeah.
And I thought, okay, great. This is an opportunity then to watch 1917. It's probably my favourite war movie of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, particularly with the use of the Steadicam stuff, the similarities between this and Come and See. I think also there's a scene in 1917 where George Mackay's character looks down and there's a doll on the floor in that house, and he says, I don't like this place. And I wondered if that was a direct reference to Come and See as well, because we have that scene when Fliora and
the dolls are on the floor
to his house and they see the dolls on the floor with the flyers, and I wondered if that was that has to be a direct reference. It has to be. The other one that I thought of was Casualties of War, which is Brian De Palma, which we spoke about in our first episode when we covered Carrie.
Haven't seen that one.
I've seen it once a long time ago. Difficult watch.
Okay.
Quite a slow burn from what I remember, but it's an interesting one, and it's told from it's a story you don't really. It's not a traditional war movie in that, shoot your gun, we're going to shoot the baddies. Simplified. It's more about, I guess, how everyone loses in war.
Yeah. Okay.
Ultimately, even the people that are causing the problems, perhaps. Or definitely they're losing as well, because you're doing bad shit that's gonna make your soul stink.
Oh yeah, you just end up morally bankrupt and a husk of a human.
Yeah, so and that was one I thought of. What else did I think of? Pearl Harbor. Yeah, no, it's not anything like this.
What about Apocalypse Now?
Apocalypse Now, yes, that's a war movie.
I feel like that was something that Truffaut referenced when he said that all war movies were sort of at their heart thrilling and therefore not truly anti-war.
Yeah. One that you haven't seen yet, unless you watched it in secret, Zone of Interest.
No.
I went to see that earlier on in the year on my own during the day, watched that. That's a very interesting movie. it's sort of I don't want to spoil it, but it's a very dry telling of a Nazi family who just happened to be carrying out the worst crimes in human history.
The banality of evil.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the phrase. And it's very interesting. Like, if you took away the uniforms and some of the background stuff in that film, you wouldn't necessarily know what it's about. And that makes it all the more disturbing, in my opinion. Like, and I think it's similar to this movie in the way that it presents the information. In a way, like the most chaotic scenes in Come and See at the end, they are. I don't want to say the term well organized. That feels really disrespectful. But there's a method. They are saying to these people, take a couple of days worth of provisions with you, like they're tricking people to their death ultimately. But it's thought through, and it's the machine, and you see some of the workings of that machine in Zone of Interest, and I just thought that was interesting.
Okay. Does that sit in the pantheon of films that you wouldn't watch again, but you're glad you've seen?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
There's similarly to this film, it's not really that graphic. It's way less graphic than this film.
Yeah, I mean, this Come and See has its moments.
It does, absolutely, but it's not. I was expecting it to be way more. You'd see way more blood and injuries and more graphic detail of that sort of thing, but you don't, and I don't think you need to.
No.
At all, because it's disturbing enough as it is, the way that it's presented. But in Zone of Interest, you don't see any of that stuff, and I'm trying really hard not to spoil that. I guess you can't really. There's no real way to spoil it because it's based on historical fact. But it's interesting to explore that side of it, because a lot of people were behind the fascist movement of the Nazis because they got elected.
Yeah.
And then they became this huge killing machine. So a lot of people were tricked into it. A lot of normal people, I dare say some of them may have been decent. Not the people doing the killings, that's not what I'm saying. But some people that were just maybe hearing speeches, listening to the spin and getting tricked and going, yeah, this is what we want.
That happens year after year, doesn't it? I'm not for a second comparing the two or saying that they're in any way equal, but so many people who voted for Brexit in this country based on absolute bold-faced lies,
absolute garbage,
would go back in time and change their vote if they could now. Yeah, it's the same thing. Obviously it's not
comparable, really.
No,
but it's an example of how a nation's opinions can be shaped with very simple techniques, really.
God, if the Nazis had fucking Cambridge Analytica,
but that's the danger. That's why we need to be thinking about this stuff now.
Absolutely. It's more insidious now than ever.
We cannot forget, under any circumstances, we cannot forget what happened. And that's why these films need to exist, and that's why we need to make sure everyone's aware this stuff happened and it's very real, and we do not want it to fucking happen anymore. Anyway, can we... Is there a...
Going back to the movie, what were your thoughts in terms of the progression of the film? Because I had an inkling that you might find possibly the first two acts quite slow, and that you wouldn't necessarily gel with some of the more surrealist stuff.
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
I was, and by extension that, I was very confused. So when I'm confused watching a film, all I can think about is being confused.
Right. Do you sort of check out a little bit?
Yeah. Kind of. And then scenes were going on for a long time. Particularly that one when he's walking through the mud, and I'm thinking, what's going on? It didn't really click with me.
Does it now?
I mean, I don't know what that scene means, honestly. Like, why was he walking through? I've got no idea. I just know that he was really traumatized.
He was in the swamp of sadness.
Oh, is that what it was? Was it a reference to Labyrinth?
Never-ending Story.
I thought that was...
Not the Bog of Eternal Stench.
Right, the Bog of Eternal Stench. I'm getting my bogs confused here.
Bog season.
I did find quite a lot of this difficult to get through.
Much like they did in the bog.
Yeah. Just because some of the scenes went on for ages and I didn't know what was going on. So I was just sort of scratching my head.
Okay.
quite a lot of it. It probably would make way more sense on a second viewing. And I suppose everyone says this movie is a masterpiece objectively, and I can't disagree with that. I don't necessarily know what an objectively good movie is. In my mind, there is no such thing really as an objectively good movie, because all art is subjective. But as close as you can get, I guess this would be.
I mean, it's very well made.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the budget was.
Oh, no. I looked it up, but you can't find out.
No.
It grossed 21 million.
Did it really?
Yeah, but I don't know.
What, domestically or internationally or?
Internationally.
Okay. I would be surprised if it had a huge budget. I don't know much about the Russian film industry, but I know that, I mean, it's very rare for one of their movies to sort of break through the international zeitgeist and be screened outside of Russia.
I can't think of another Russian movie.
Well, like I say, Night Watch, Day Watch, they're the only ones that sort of sprang to mind, really.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Those bizarre films.
I love them.
Okay.
Look, big fan.
I think it must have been a relatively expensive movie, because there was so much that happened in the second half of the movie, with the bombs going off and the bullets, the tracer rounds, and loads of
live rounds they were using.
Live rounds, loads of extras. Yeah, it's like so dangerous. You couldn't do it today.
No way.
But it must have had a fair amount of backing to be able to do that stuff.
I feel like we'd have heard more about it if there'd been sort of more genuine danger. I do think it was really irresponsible to use live rounds. That's kind of crazy.
How much more danger is there than firing live rounds at actors and dropping bombs 10 feet away from a child?
Was that real as well?
Yeah.
Right. I was wondering how they accomplished the scenes with the bombing in the forest.
Well, I doubt it was they flew a plane over and
no, but like sort of explosives from the ground up rather than
yeah.
Yeah.
But he was so close to it as well, and obviously way before CGI, so you're not looking at it going, "Oh, is that it?" No, it's real.
Yeah, they're children in actual peril.
Yeah.
I find that to be sort of the most pivotal moment in the film, because I think it's at that point that he starts to go, "Oh fuck, this is real. I'm not just playing grown up. I'm in actual danger right now."
Yeah, because up to that point, he still really wants to go off with the rebels, right?
He's devastated that he gets left behind at the camp.
Yeah,
and actually sits and cries in the forest. He's so gutted.
Yeah, he was desperate to go out there and fight, and then they leave him behind, thinking, and I guess they were like, "This is a kid, we can't take him." And there's that exchange when he asks for the password and the guy doesn't give it to him. He says, "You should have shot me." So he knows that he's not a killer.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't got it in him, and he doesn't ever fire his weapon until the very end of the movie.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I didn't think he did. And even then, it's not a human.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're with the group of soldiers in the forest, the partisans, there's a part where they do a group photo, and a photographer has a fake moustache on. Why? What does that mean?
He had a fake Hitler moustache on, didn't he?
I was very confused by that.
I think it's, well, much like the Hitler effigy that the people in the remaining villager camp makes.
Yeah.
And then leaves in the middle of the road for the Nazis to find. It's just it's a different form of warfare, isn't it? It's mockery.
Right. Okay. So it's a costume.
Yeah.
They're mocking him by saying, "Oh, we've got this silly little tash."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those moustaches are actually illegal now. You can't have that moustache anymore.
Really?
You're not allowed to call your child Adolf.
Good.
Maybe you are. You shouldn't.
I mean, I can't imagine who would. Yeah.
Donald Trump, I assume. Yeah, I was confused by that, but I guess that makes sense. That was just one part where I was very confused.
What were the other parts? Let me see if I can enlighten you.
You mentioned the walking through the bog already.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what was going on there.
Well, I think it's just because the villagers has sort of made their escape to a nearby island. So I think they had no choice but to go through the bog to get to them.
What do you mean they escaped to a nearby island?
So
I
when
thought they were all killed.
Fleora and Glasha go back to Fleora's house,
Yeah.
obviously he doesn't see the pile of bodies behind the house.
Oh, right. So he
Glasha
thinks
does.
they've gone to an island.
Well, no, he knows that they have.
But they haven't. They've been killed, right?
But they're the remaining members of the village. Most of them were killed
I
and
thought
piled up.
I thought everyone in the village was killed.
The remaining village members were on the island.
I assumed that. Did they go to an island then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I completely missed that. So I just assumed the people that he met up with were just other people from other villages or whatever.
Also, the burnt man.
Oh, of course.
Was his uncle? Was the very first person we see warning him not to dig up the gun on the beach.
Right, I see. I guess my confusion is why were we seeing him walk through the bog for so long? There was like a couple of minute stretch where he's just walking through it.
Just because the whole movie is just how many hardships did these people come up against?
It's a metaphor.
I don't think it's a metaphor, no. I mean, it could be quite literal. I don't know what the terrain is in that place. Like, the script was based on first-hand accounts of survivors. So I imagine most of what's included, if not all of what's included, was pretty bloody accurate. So I just take it to mean that. I mean, you could take it as a metaphor, yeah. Like, you know, you hear the phrase all the time, like, oh, it's like wading through treacle.
Yeah.
And it was like a really uphill battle for them.
I think I was definitely really confused about the last part of the movie as well. Ultimately, I knew what was going on, but yeah, just when he gets collected by the bloke with the horse, and he's like, pretend to be my family. I was just very confused. I didn't know. Like I said, I spent most of my time going, what's going on?
Well, I'm not sure if those people were not Jewish and were therefore under the impression that they would be spared.
Okay.
Because up until that point, they don't realise they're going to be herded into a barn and burnt alive, because Fleora's kind of yelling at people who are being herded down the road, like, they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. You're going to die. And they're just like being ushered along, blind to that fact. Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, in some ways, the fact that I could only focus on my confusion is a me thing. That's a me problem for sure.
But do you not think some of the confusion is the point?
I do exactly what I was going to say. I do think a lot of the confusion, maybe I wouldn't phrase it like that. I wasn't necessarily going to say it was the point. But when it got to the point where they were shoving people into the barn, I was like, okay, right. Unfortunately, I know what's happening here. So the fact that revelation, I didn't know that what I was watching up to that point did probably make it more affecting, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And probably more closely mirrored what was actually happening to the people involved.
Yeah. Well, like I said, that they were being tricked.
Yeah.
Take a couple of days provisions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what are they doing with them? And then, like I said, when you see them going into the barn, like slow reveal, and you see them putting petrol on the pillow and that sort of thing, like, oh, God, okay. Apparently that was the most harrowing thing for Alexei Kravchenko, the guy that played, or the boy at the time that played Fleora. That was the most harrowing experience of the entire shoot, was being rammed into that barn.
I can imagine, yeah.
It must be, yeah, I was trying to put myself in that position as well, being such close proximity to so many people with screaming and yelling. It just must have been a very difficult experience. And also, I guess, if you're from that part of the world, you know this stuff is ingrained into you. I guess 1984 this was filmed, so parents, grandparents would have been passing this information on. And yeah, that was the most difficult part of the shoot for him. But they were also, I was very confused when they were saying you can leave the kids and come out. Thinking, what do you mean? Why is that a thing? What do you mean, leave the kids and you can come out? Why were they trying to spare the adults but not the children?
They weren't. They were playing mind games.
They were just fucking with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I mean, again, I guess that's effective, because I didn't know what they were doing.
It's just pure evil. I mean, as evidenced by their reactions, like the laughing, the maniacal laughter, like the posing for photographs with a gun to a child's head. Like, it's so fucked up and so true to life, from what I gather. just kind of unthinkable what human beings are capable of.
Yeah. That's, to me, that's the key point of this is realizing what human beings are capable of. I think it's too dangerous now to go, we won't do that again. You've got to, well, okay, hopefully not, but the only way we're going to do that is by remembering not to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think the point of the movie is that everybody has the capability to go down that dark road.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think it's where you grow up, the opportunities that you have, and the people that you're surrounded with. That's what influences you.
Yeah.
I think for anyone to say, I would never do that,
you just don't know.
It's a tricky conversation to have. Like, you're not saying that everyone has capacity entirely for evil, but I would say most people probably do, given the right circumstances and a nudge.
If they think they're doing it for the right reasons.
And an influence in that direction. And, if it's spun to you in a certain way.
Especially when you're a little bit younger and you're more impressionable.
Yeah. But this movie is absolutely told from a perspective of the kids in the film. So, you're seeing the close-ups of the Nazis laughing and, like you say, holding a gun to the children's head and just the attack on the barn as well, which that goes on for ages.
It does,
It's really difficult. The sound of the screams, and they're throwing in grenades and flamethrowers, and just the joy that they seem to take in it as well is really, the way that it's presented is it's gross. I can't relate to that at all. That feels surreal to me. And I guess you mentioned that some of the surreal aspects of this film, and I don't think I really grasped them while I was watching it necessarily, but I think
some of the more surrealist aspects kind of hide in plain sight, because to most decent people, all of the film is surreal, like you've just said.
I would also argue that sometimes life feels surreal. I don't know about you.
I guess.
Like I say again, we have not been subjected to anything like this, and I'm so happy and thankful for that. But the few times where I've experienced trauma and stuff, it does feel surreal. You don't really feel like you're there. It's this weird thing that's sort of, maybe it's just a reflection of me needing therapy. We spoke about that in Stand By Me. But you sort of disassociate a little bit. You're like, oh, fuck, this really horrible thing's happening. And you notice yourself noticing it. And that feels surreal to me. Like, real life feels surreal. So, yeah, I guess it's true to life in a way.
I think it's quite interesting that we're sort of shown this movie through the perspective of Fliora as well, because there is like a naivety to it, and as we were saying, like the confusion, while it may not have been the point as such, I might have phrased that badly, but it's certainly a part of it.
Yeah.
Because when you are thrown into this completely unprepared, then it would be confusing. It would be really confusing and terrifying. And I love the sound design that sort of plays into that and assists that. And I think that becomes really obvious during the scene, the bombing scene, when they're in the forest and he sort of partially loses his hearing.
Yeah.
Which I can super relate to, because the tinnitus and the hearing loss on my left side has gotten so much worse. And it does sort of make you feel like you're going mad sometimes when you can hear this inside your own head. And I can only imagine what that's like amplified and in this situation.
With this mortal danger surrounding you. Well, plus you can't hear properly. Yeah, it's terrifying. Horrifying.
And the fact, actually, second time that Bad Boy Bobby's coming up in a single episode. I'm apologise now. It actually made me think of the way sound was used in that film. Obviously, they didn't record it in the same way. Obviously, in that show, we talked about the fact that, was it binaural mics? Were they called?
Oh, yes.
That the actor was wearing under a wig.
Your hat microphones.
Yeah.
Head microphones.
So I think they were called binaural microphones.
Sure.
But that was, the intention was to record the sound as the protagonist heard it. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit, because you are sort of presented everything from Fliora's perspective, including the sound and what he focuses on and what he picks out of what's going on around him. And I thought that was really effective. And the constant like droning and the overlapping of noise was really disorienting.
Yeah.
In much the same way as, like, it's an example I use a lot when it comes to sound, but the start of Irreversible, I know you're not a fan of Gaspar Noé, but allow me this.
And I've not seen it.
you'd hate it.
Yeah.
But there's the opening section is really disorienting. The way the camera moves, and particularly the sound that's used over it, because it's at a frequency that's designed to make you feel nauseous. And this kind of really reminds me of that. It feels really reminiscent of something like that, in that the overlapping noise is just a full-on assault. And it's really difficult to pick out what might be relevant. And I don't know, it's headache inducing.
There was so much going on with the sound that I almost didn't notice any of it. And there were obviously bits and pieces where it was very obvious and intentional for you to say to you, look, concentrate on this or think about this. This is what Fleur is hearing, all from his perspective.
Something else that I want to talk about, which occurred to me on first watch and even more the second watch. There are so many instances where the characters seem to look straight down the lens.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a true fourth wall break because they never address the camera, but they do stare down it. And I don't know, I did a bit of digging online and I couldn't find any sort of definitive reasoning for this. There's a couple of really interesting Reddit threads about this movie, actually, if you can find them. And somebody on there sort of likened it to as if the characters are kind of staring down the lens and challenging the viewer, kind of as if to say, why aren't you doing anything about this?
Well, the film is called Come and See as well. I know it's got it's a biblical reference, but if you just take the words on face value, come and see, it's like, look, we're showing you this fucking horrible shit. Don't forget about it. It's interesting. There are a lot of instances in this film where you've got the portrait and they're almost looking into the camera.
It's really arresting.
Multiple characters, yeah. And it actually made me think of Moonlight, which we spoke about just last week. There's a lot of that sort of thing going on in that, where you're almost placed between the character you're looking at and whatever they're looking at. I thought about that actually quite a lot, and I wondered if Barry Jenkins, I mean, he knows everything about film. I'm sure that he's seen this. He spent a lot of time in that Criterion cupboard on YouTube. I think I've seen a few videos of that. But yeah, I did think about Moonlight actually, maybe just because we've watched that in the last week.
I think there is actually a really nice Criterion release of Come and See.
And there
it's funny you say that.
It's when I told my friend that we were covering Come and See, he went, you got to watch the 4K. You got to watch the 4K version. And I'm thinking, have we? Like, really? But I can sort of see where he's coming from now, because we watched the DVD, which is not the greatest quality.
It was the only one available to us at the time.
It's I do think maybe you would get more from a 4K version. A lot of the stuff with the sound, not the sound, the visual stuff with the color palette and that sort of thing might be a little bit more obvious.
Might pop a little bit.
Yeah, because I know it was restored some years back.
Okay.
And apparently it is the definitive way to watch it, or so my friend tells me anyway. But I said to him, no, I got a cheap DVD off eBay.
It will suffice.
Yeah, and maybe I'll as a Christmas present or something, I'll get you a Merry Christmas. There's Come and See on 4K Blu-ray.
I'm going to go away for 2 hours and 16 minutes.
I'm going out. I'm doing some sim racing for 3 days. You watch that.
Sounds good to me.
Does it? What, for me to go away for 3 days?
Yeah. I can watch all of the challenging cinema that I like.
Please do. Please. Because I tell you what, I need a laugh.
Does it not make you feel something though? And I return to this time and time again when I try and rationalize why I like difficult films. And I think it just, obviously it's thought-provoking, but ultimately these films make me grateful more than anything. Obviously, like there's the reverence for the victims in this specific case anyway. The fact that these terrible things did happen, atrocities like this, and probably way worse. And it just makes me feel relieved and grateful.
The feelings that I had with this movie, it's hard to say because I spent so much time in confusion, I didn't really know what to think. Obviously the message is war is bad, don't kill people. I'm not trying to be funny.
No, I know.
I'm really not. But I knew that stuff already. It didn't, aside from the historical information and the perspective, I guess, it was interesting to see a perspective, a first-hand perspective of how this would happen. I ultimately, at the end of the movie, thought I could have watched a documentary about this and gotten the same information. And I don't know if I've changed my mind on that. I think I still feel the same way.
Okay.
But the way that I view films, for me, it's more, I need my hand holding with films. I need the filmmakers to manipulate me completely and say,
you need a score to swell and tell you how to feel.
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
I do. Like I said the other day, and I wonder if I'm a real human being sometimes, because we watched this.
I think that's pretty normal.
Is
I
it?
think that's pretty normal. Yeah. I'm the weird one because I love sitting in discomfort. I don't feel comfortable watching films like this, but I enjoy it.
I wasn't comfortable, as particularly in the last act of the movie, like horrifying stuff. And it's horrible, and I felt gross and disgusting, ashamed that I'm a human being and human beings are capable of this stuff. But ultimately, I could have watched documentaries about it. But having said that, trying to see it from someone else's perspective, and I say again, there's a certain group of people that should watch this movie. The people that do deny this sort of thing happened, they should watch it. I'm glad that I've seen it, and it's nudged me to do some further research, because my knowledge history is weak at best. But it has nudged me to kind of explore that a little bit more. So I'm thankful for that. But for me personally, I need it to hit me over the head a bit more with stuff, because subtlety is sort of lost on me a lot of the time.
It's crazy. Like this film to me is anything but subtle.
When I say subtle, obviously the depiction of events, of real life events, is not subtle.
Yeah.
It's not as graphic as it could have been.
Thankfully.
Yeah, agreed. But there are certain things with we watched the thing about the colour, completely missed all of that. The reason for the portrait shots. There's a lot of stuff that was completely lost on me, and I would say that's more subtle. You might not, but I didn't particularly notice all of that stuff. So to me, it seems subtle.
Mm-hmm.
A film that I love and we watched and we spoke about earlier already, 1917. That makes me so emotional, that film, because it's the technique and what happened and how that film was made, but also the score and everything. And it makes me feel a certain thing because I'm being guided very.
I don't think it's at all weird that you favour more traditional movies.
All I'm saying is that you asked me about my feelings.
Yeah.
And I would say I felt way more watching 1917 than I did watching this movie. While I was watching it, I'll qualify that.
Confused is way better than turned on. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I think confused is an acceptable answer to how this movie makes you feel.
I think that was my main thing, is that I was just confused. I struggled to know what I was meant to feel, other than this is bad. Yeah, I know it's bad.
Do you not find it kind of haunting, in a sense that I will be thinking about this for the next couple of weeks?
I have thought about it a lot for the last few days.
But because we're doing a podcast.
Yeah, and now I never want to think about it again. Like it will always be there. It'll always be a reference point that I have. And I said earlier that I was glad that I watched it, and I am. I'm not going to be dwelling on this, because I feel like I've extracted everything that I need to from this film now, and I would quite like to put it out of my head.
That's fair.
And I'm not saying that that's right, but I do think there's a certain, for me anyway, the way that I operate is I consume the information and then I try to move on with that knowledge kind of simmering in the background, but not too much. Because I just
you have to preserve your own mental health at the end of the day.
Like, I don't really watch the news. And the main reason for that is because I don't want to be depressed all the time. And when there's really important things happening, yes, I'll tune in and try to keep up with what's going on. But
you've got me to fill you in anyway.
Yeah. but the way I kind of think of it is, if something really important is happening, it will get to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not this. My nan always watched the news at 10. Oh, we've got to watch the news. Fucking why? Why have we got to watch the news?
See, I'm on her side. I like to know what's going on, good and bad.
But it's all fucking Doris didn't get her paper delivered. I guess I'm sort of more talking local
That's more
news.
local news, yeah.
LWT.
Neil grew a marrow the size of a small dog. Entered it into competition and won.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I will try to avoid the news unless there's something really important happening. I know there's always something really important happening, but you can't sit in this stuff the whole time.
No,
You're
I get
going
it.
mad.
I get it.
Like, I'm glad that I've seen it, but I do want to move on from it now.
I sit in this stuff all the time and I'm deeply mentally ill, so as if to
Well,
prove your point.
You said it.
But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff we could talk about. I mean, there's a lot that's been said online about the symbolism of the animals.
What animal? There was a thing that's not a duck or a swan.
There's a stork in the forest,
right? And that means something.
Well, so I did a bit of digging. Apparently, storks are considered bad omens in Poland, which is very near to Belarus. So I don't know. Could be that. I would say a bad omen would be pretty fucking accurate with regards to everything that happens after. But also storks are kind of a symbol of birth, new life.
Okay.
So why?
Yeah.
Well, the old kind of fables, the storks that bring the babies. No?
I've got no idea what you're talking.
It's that thing you tell children so you don't have to discuss sex and the workings of biology.
Oh, okay. The birds
You've
and the
never
bees.
heard that?
No.
That storks deliver babies.
Can I be completely honest with you?
I'd rather you did, yeah.
The first
I don't want you to
time
lie.
I'm ever hearing the word stork is today. No, there's a film
Not
called
even the
Stork.
margarine.
There's a film called The Stork, isn't there?
I don't know.
What's a margarine?
Called Stork.
There's
Never
a
mind.
margarine called Stork.
Never mind.
No, honestly, I've never heard of a stork before.
There's a cow.
There is a cow, unfortunately, met its demise for this film.
I literally made a note that was just like, oh my God, give this cow the animal Oscar. This is the best animal performance I've seen since the dog in Anatomy of a Fall. And then I was like, oh no, it's not acting. Oh shit.
Yeah.
There's
a horse, but there's also what's that animal that the Nazi has?
It's a slow loris.
Monkey bet what? I'm sorry.
A slow loris.
I'm learning about these new a slow loris.
Who knew this would be a lesson on the animal kingdom?
Is that
today?
like a lorax?
No.
Oh, is that a real animal? Lorax?
Isn't that a Dr. Seuss thing?
It's a cartoon movie, I think.
This is going off the rails. It's a slow loris. I think it's like loosely related to the primate, but it's indigenous to like Indonesia, like Sri Lanka, that sort of area.
Okay.
So I guess much like you talked about the Nazi lady in the vehicle eating lobster, it's another thing to sort of distance them and kind of say, here's this thing that shouldn't be here, that's potentially an invading species, much like the Nazis.
Yeah, and he was also feeding it, which is in complete contrast to what they were doing.
Feeding the animal, like treating the animals better than the people.
Nurturing this thing while also murdering innocent people.
Yeah. And I think it was just supposed to sort of add to the shock factor as well, because they're quite odd looking creatures.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what the fuck is that doing there? It's like just another sort of, what the hell?
I spent 10 minutes wondering what the fuck it was and if we were going to see it again.
You'd never seen animatronics that good before.
Yeah. Is that Andy Serkis?
Yeah, in a mocap suit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, should we talk about the end of the movie then?
We probably should, yeah.
So, I had no idea that this movie was posing the question, would you kill baby Hitler? Until we got to the end of the movie and you turned to me and you said, what do you think about the question of killing baby Hitler? I was like, why are you asking me that? And you went, because that's what the movie's asking you. I went, is it? You went, yeah. And that's basically my experience with this movie. I suppose it's obvious when you think about it. But yeah, he finds the picture of Hitler in the mud and on the ground covered in dirt, and he starts shooting it.
Which, yeah, is, as you say, the only time he shoots his gun in the entire film.
Only time he ever fires a weapon. And as he's shooting the picture of him, the time moves backwards and it's going back through all of the events of that time period, and it ends up
Yeah.
with Hitler as a baby.
Mm-hmm.
You see a photograph of him as a baby with his mother, which was
It's a composite.
It's
It's
a
not
composite.
a photo that exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes back in time and you see the baby and it's asking you, would you kill baby Hitler? And I guess
Fliora doesn't.
I think
That's when he stops shooting.
I think you're right. I was about to say I don't think that he would, because he stops shooting when you see that baby. And I don't know what you would do. I don't really know what I would do. But what would you do? Would you end the life of baby Hitler?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because when you're talking about changing history, what else changes? Like, butterfly effect. What if even bigger atrocities were to happen?
Well, Prince Harry would never have worn that uniform.
Yeah, that was the worst thing to come out of the Second World War, wasn't it?
He learned a valuable lesson that day.
I don't know that he did, I don't think he did. Knowing that this baby would go on to cause the deaths of millions and millions of Jewish people and Black people and just people that didn't fit his picture of what he thought was correct. Yeah, I would drop kick that baby into a volcano and have a nice cup of tea.
If we ever invent time travel, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that could just be like an excursion that we do. We drop kick baby Hitler into a volcano.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I think it's definitely a philosophical question, isn't it? Because my answer would be, if you asked me, would I kill baby Hitler? My initial response would be, well, that's not possible, because if I can go back in time and kill baby Hitler, then I would not be here now to consider.
I thought I was the literal one.
It's a paradox. But then all time travel is. I don't know, I don't know if I could kill a baby.
It'd be dead easy. They're tiny. Arguably much easier to kill than a grown human.
Okay, logistically speaking, it's probably much simpler.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I don't want to kill anyone.
Given the knowledge of everything that happened because of that person.
Yeah.
I would say if it was absolutely, if you were absolutely 100% guaranteed that those things would never happen, the Holocaust would never happen if you killed that baby, then I would give it consideration. But who's to say that if you did that, it wouldn't
that's the
still
other
happen?
question, isn't it? How much of it was him and how much of it was the people surrounding him and
circumstances,
a collection of ideas that were filtered down. It's impossible to say.
But he existed because of the environment that he grew up in. So who's to say that someone else wouldn't have just filled his shoes and done exactly the same thing? Goebbels. Yeah, maybe you don't even need that figurehead. Someone else would step in and do that. I don't know. But I guess what I'm saying is, if it was 100% guaranteed that it would change and that wouldn't happen, then yes, I probably would. But
it's an impossible question.
But that's the point of it, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
That's the point of these sorts of questions, and it is interesting. I'm just really surprised that I didn't get that all when we're watching it, because it's really obvious when you think about it. I think I was just very tired by the end of this movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an assault on all the senses, and it's
a long movie.
It's a long film, and it's really, really hard going, and it is. It's a bit of an endurance test at times. But you watched it.
Yes.
And we covered it.
Yes.
And you never have to watch it again.
Yes, I never have to watch it again until you get the criterion for... No, because I'm going to go and do sim racing.
Yeah. We've sorted it. It's fine.
Yes.
So, would you recommend it, is my question. Well, I already know the answer because you've said it should be mandatory viewing, so...
Yeah, I would say everyone should watch this movie.
Would you personally recommend it, or would you fear that people would never speak to you again?
I would recommend this to someone that... Who would I recommend this to? I don't know. I don't know who I would,
Who do you dislike?
It's not that. It's that who do I feel like needs this information? And I don't know anyone that needs this information.
That's fair.
If I did, I wouldn't know them anymore.
None of your friends are budding dictators.
No.
That's good. That's good.
There's some people that I grew up with that I would probably say, you should watch this.
Right.
But
they're probably in jail.
I've moved away from that area now. Well, yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know if I would recommend this to anyone that I know personally.
Okay.
But there, like I said earlier, there are some people that should seek this out and watch it, and it should be mandatory viewing at school. So I'd say lunchtime, have your lunch, and watch Come and See. In fact, no, there's going to be an entire day of watching Come and See.
Oh
we can get four
God.
viewings in. How long's a school day now? Like
I think
10
my
hours?
mum would have written a letter to the headmaster.
Saying what? Can you make it 5 viewings?
No, after I went home a shadow of my former self in tears.
I bet at your school they show Passion of Christ.
No.
No. Don't like Mel Gibson movies. Or do they show Lethal Weapon 2?
Yes, that's the reason.
What women want.
Ugh. So, final question.
Yeah.
What do you score this movie out of 5?
Oh, really?
Yes, really.
Objectively?
Objectively and subjectively.
So 2 scores then?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. Objectively, I'm probably like a lot of the stuff. I don't feel like I'm really qualified to rate it, honestly, because I didn't get a lot of what I needed to from the film until after the fact. I mean, objectively, probably 4.5, I guess.
I gave it a 4.5.
I can see where people are coming from. It's a masterpiece. It's the greatest film ever made.
No, it's not. It's not The Thing.
It's not a thing. Yeah, exactly. It's not Speed. It's certainly not anywhere near my favourite because I don't necessarily watch movies. I guess ultimately I watch movies to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, and it's nice if there are some covert messages in there, like Starship Troopers, as an example.
Covert, he says.
It was covert to 14-year-old me. Okay. Yeah, I know, it's so obvious, isn't it? I'm so embarrassed by that. They're obviously fascists. I didn't love watching this. I don't know if I can really give you a score, personal. I mean, because in terms of what my personal scores are always based on enjoyment. And because I didn't really enjoy watching the film, it's going to be low, which is not really indicative to the film we watched. So
Undecided, needs more giant bugs.
I'm not, on fear of sounding like a complete maniac, I'm not going to give you a personal score.
Okay, that's fine.
What about you?
4.5 and 4.5.
Okay, great.
I think it's excellent.
Mm.
I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's pretty darn close.
I think a lot of people would say to you that it is perfect.
Yeah, they would.
And,
and that's fine. They're entitled.
Yeah.
But again, it's not The Thing.
Yeah, no Kurt Russell in this.
So, that's over and done with.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing next week?
I don't know. What are we doing?
Are covering 13.
The Kevin, is it Kevin Costner with the
What?
He's playing is it JFK?
Are you thinking of JFK?
Cuban Missile Crisis? No. Or no.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's not a coming of age movie.
I'm talking about I believe it's Catherine Hardwicke. I'm going to embarrass myself horribly if it's not. Yeah, the Catherine Hardwicke movie with Emma Rachel Wood.
Okay.
And Nikki Reed.
Never heard of it.
Teenage girl shit.
Cool.
Bit of a change of pace from this week, thankfully.